Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Supply Chain Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Audrey Ross. I'm subbing in for my trade bestie, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, and I'm excited because we've got our guest, Sabrina Booker, here today. So I'll bring her up in just a moment. So hopefully you're all able to see this streaming onto either Sarah's LinkedIn page and the Let's Talk Supply Chain page. And so with that, we'll get started. Most of you know me. I'm Audrey Ross. I'm here in Toronto, where it's very hot for Toronto. Today up for Let's Talk Supply Chain include the episode of the week, which is episode 209, which is talking about skills dynamics. There's certainly some new live shows coming to LTSC, including my friend Eric Johnson. So that'll be live, I think, in beginning of August. If you haven't already, check out the franchise expansion. So Let's Talk Supply Chain has moved to Asia Pac with Jonathan Kempe, and so that's about to get rolling and underway. And of course, you can always check out the website for more on Let's Talk Supply Chain and check out the merchandise and the supply chain dictionary. So lots of helpful resources that Sarah has put together. So you can look at those, not right now because we're going to talk to Sabrina. So with that, let's bring Sabrina up to the stage. If I can figure out how to do this. Some of my friends like Davin and Peter will have patience with me because this is my first time doing this. So here we go.
Hey, Audrey,
hi, Sabrina.
How are you?
Doing, a little nervous. Hanging in there.
A little nervous.
Yeah.
But I would like to just say thank, Let's Talk Supply Chain for having me here today. I'm Sabrina Booker, located in Jacksonville, Florida. So a little far from Toronto, but I'm excited to be here and get into the nitty-gritty of these topics and just have our thoughts and coffee this morning. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, and do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? So what,
Yes.
Maybe what you spend your day on, or what your favorite coffee is, that kind of thing.
Of course. So I recently just graduated with my master's in supply chain and logistics, and I work for the Army Corps of Engineers, and we do a lot of work in the Florida as well as the Puerto Rico district, renourishing beaches, dredging, and doing a lot of renourishment for the beaches along the St. Barracks walls, of course, and the outsides of the regions in the, our U.S. territories.
Yeah.
So a lot of work goes behind the scenes of those things, working with geologists, finding sustainable things for the environment, as well as what is best for shipping, trying to get those things in and out of, the rivers as well as canals. So that type of thing on the day-to-day.
Nice. Wow. It's nice to meet someone who's kind of involved in that part of our sort of sector. I visited Charleston a couple years ago, and they have to do the dredging,
Yes.
I guess in their port as well. And so I wasn't there for like supply chain stuff. I was there with my stepnephew, and we were exploring because you find all these fossils when they do this dredging. So there's this whole other little, it works for us in supply chain, but also 7-year-old kids get a real kick out of all the stuff that is kind of found, and they kind of dig through it on the beach. So
it's really funny that you say that, because there's these little runoff banks when people are, when they're finished dredging, and you can find these really big shark teeth that you can't probably find in a store, so I understand the fossils is like the coolest part, and getting out in the field to look at some of the stuff is so cool.
Love it. Okay, well, we've got a question of the week. So now everybody knows who we are. So then we go into Let's Talk Supply Chain does a question of the week every Wednesday. So we kind of do the preview of it. And it goes on to LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, everywhere that you find LTSC. And so the question this week is, are you willing to hire someone with visible tattoos? So
the question is, yes, I would hire somebody with visible tattoos. I think it would come down to their technical skill sets. I see so often that people want to be great managers and they want to go to the textbook of what a great manager should look like, what a great manager should possess. And some of those things you can overlook somebody's technical skill sets and what they add to the team can be invaluable. It can have intrinsic value of where you guys are going to be in the future, where we can go as a team. And so I just would like to say that I would hire somebody with tattoos, but I would definitely be looking for things that add intrinsic value to my team as well.
Yeah. Well, Davin's hoping we'll hire him. No, I think it's one of those questions that maybe 10 years ago was more of a, like what defines what we look like in a professional setting. And I think nowadays people are like, I can wear sweatpants and be at work. So maybe our standards or rules, were maybe fit at one time, but like it's starting to I really need someone who can, be an engineer in the Army Corps, and it doesn't really matter to me, how they're doing their hair, what they're showing up in. So,
Right. Yeah. And I definitely believe there's a standard. There's a standard that should be had. But I also don't think that it should go into your personal decisions of a tattoo, maybe as far as the culture. I think that can all be a part of the company culture, and your manager as well as your environment kind of sets that culture. So I think that's important to also be able to read the room when you're looking to apply for jobs. Is this the place I want to be? Do they align with, things that I find important, or do I have tattoos? I also think that's important.
That sort of culture and what people are prioritizing or what people are emphasizing. Right. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Because I think we all know, there's enough sort of info and resources out there. We have an idea of what, sort of a professional person, wears. Right. I'm probably not going to wear my, tie-dye sweatpants when I get back to the office, but which is fine. It's kind of a funny thing. I know people wear sort of flip-flops or slides to the office, and I never could, because when I was there, I just didn't, I don't feel like I'm in the office if I have this footwear, so I think we all have that kind of level of, what I should
and should not. And that was a bit of adjustment for me, because when I moved to Florida, that was more of a relaxed state, because people are working out in the field. It's a lot of water. It can be very hot sometimes. So I was like, oh wow, sandals and things of that nature. So that was a bit different for me, because I felt the same. Just even in business school, there was a standard to wear a blazer and khakis and things of that nature. So every place, the company culture can differ. That can look like sandals in one area, that can look like a suit and tie in others. So just being able to adapt, I think, is the important thing.
Some great comments here. So, Sabrina, part of the show is we get, because we have, it's live stream, we get a lot of comments from
I see.
People around the world. Yeah. So we've got a few, we have some regulars like Davin. And then, we have people will drop in questions too that sometimes we have time for, and sometimes we save for later. So everyone can stay tuned on that. So let's pop into, there should be the thoughts and coffee post. So Sarah writes a post every Sunday about sort of, it's when she has her thoughts and coffee, not that she doesn't have them all the time, but it's the kind of main time when she's doing that. So that's not coming up for me. So let's first jump into one of the articles. So let's go into the article from Supply Chain Dive, and it's titled, I'm going to share it with you.
Mm-hmm.
somehow. Somehow I'm going to share this with you. Okay, maybe not. No, it maybe won't let me share it. So that's interesting. No, it's just us. Weird. Okay, well, that's fun. So I will give you the summary for everyone here. So Zebra, the headline is Zebra to buy Fetch Robotics as interest in warehouse automation grows. So that's put out by Supply Chain Dive. And essentially, there's a company called Zebra Technologies, and they're intending to acquire the remaining 95% of Fetch Robotics. It already owns the other 5%. And it has a real focus on warehouse digitization. And they've been doing a lot of work to integrate their respective technologies. So they've developed a cloud robotics platform for moving material around the warehouse. And they've been using Zebra has a technology to scan a barcode that also transmits a command to a robot to let it know the location of material that needs to be moved. What maybe are your thoughts on getting into robots in the warehouse? Oh, there, AJ, thank you.
I think the robots in the warehouse is extremely huge. There's been a lot of news about companies like Amazon actually, a lot of their employees are going on strike because of, labor intensive manufacturing warehouses, as well as, of course, just the bulk of being in the warehouse is getting even more labor intensive as more companies want to give their customers the demand of giving, their products 1 or 2 day shipping. So I think that this is huge, especially for Zebra Industries, because this isn't the first automated type of robotics for a warehouse that is fetching different types of items, but it's the fact that Zebra sees this as being a competitor to move it up in industry, as well as the company is very reputable. Even their stock price from 2016 to 2021 their growth is amazing, which, that means that they can do a lot of things in industry. They have a lot of reputable autonomous robots in their portfolio. And the hardest thing about that is the integration piece. So you can create the robot and you can have these great assets for companies, but to have the seamless integration is really where you get the bang for your buck, because how can you kind of come in and say, I want to get the layout already, because every warehouse is going to be different. You're going to have different materials you're moving. So the fact that they have kind of gotten that down of integrating things seamlessly for different sectors is huge, as well as internationally is even bigger. So this acquisition is changing the game for sure.
Yeah. And they talk a bit about how there are companies that have like 40% employee turnover. And I know we can all have started to notice with the pandemic and moving towards post-pandemic, there is, some people have described it as sort of a tsunami of job changes, of people leaving different industries entirely, people taking the time to do that, real pivot. Like, I always wanted to be this, and now I'm going to go and do that because pandemic, right? And so I think this, these are tools. Obviously we're hoping that we won't eliminate a lot of jobs, but as you said, if we can sort of, have less of that sort of hard or manual labor and use that automation and those tools for that purpose, then, employees, we can level up and have more technical and computer skills, so that we're, collaborating in concert with the automation, and not, sort of losing out, because that's usually a big concern, but also that we're sort of, maybe that'll shift to the 4-day work week. Maybe that's what kind of gets us more time in our day as well. So some things to be excited about. So yeah, some of the comments too, it's the thing. Yeah.
And even to that thought, I think it's going to be a major shift as we see the turnovers happening more and more. And this is for the audience as well as you, Audrey, what responsibility will these companies have to retool their labor force? I think you can offset some of the major layoffs in terms of saying, okay, this is not just a body. This is somebody who's working for my company diligently. So as these jobs are labor intensive, how can we retool our labor force in general so they have more of, they have more tools to work around the warehouse, not just in one way, they can have the mobility as well. So I think that we'll see that in years to come.
Yeah. Well, on that insightful note, let's move on to an article from The Hustle on California's drought puts a damper on the absolutely nuts almond demand. So I'm hoping, my friend AJ can maybe help me pull that up too. There we go. So moving to California, apparently the demand for almonds is higher than ever. I really like oat milk, but I don't know. I kind of mix them too. I do like cashew milk or all of the different kinds and mix them a little bit because I found that the blend is, I don't know, it works for me. Mm-hmm. Do you do any of this sort of non-dairy, Sabrina?
I love almond milk. I started almond milk maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it was not widely available in places like, for me, in coffee shops or in ingredients and other things that I bought. And so that was new to me. I didn't always have it readily available. Now it's everywhere. So I believe that the demand is at an all-time high because it's everywhere. But I do love almond milk.
It's it's funny. It's just become ubiquitous. Like now you go to almost any coffee place and there's like 7 different, it used to be like the 4, okay, it's homogenized milk, 2% milk, skim milk. And then now it's like, and coconut and almonds. And you're like, oh, okay, very fancy. So some of the facts from the article that they highlight. So I think most of us have seen the brand Blue Diamond Growers. So they do the almond breeze, which I think is one of the more, you see it on almost every grocery store. So they apparently grew sales last year to 1.6 billion, which is more than twice the previous decade. And California's international almond exports, so not just sending them into the U.S. market, but sending them up to Morocco. It's like 148% increase, 132% increase into Vietnam, and like a over 50% increase into India. So it's not just sort of a North American habit change. It seems to be really going global.
Right.
So those kind of numbers are interesting. But then this is also kind of going into that California has this massive drought. And so they're struggling with the water that's used for, kind of growing these almonds.
Right. And just for context here, for one almond, it takes 1.1 gallons of water to make. So to grow a pound of almonds, it's 1,900 gallons for 1 pound. And that's for most nuts. Your walnuts, your hazelnuts, your pistachios. It's just the demand, right? Yeah. And so where it becomes a problem in California is that almonds, and of course almond milk, is using a lot of water. And that water creates a lot of runoff, which has a lot of environmental effects to your plants as well as to your wildlife. And so people are taking, stakeholders in this industry are taking a very close look at the environmental impacts to these things because, you get one planet as well as some of the destruction can be, permanent or last a long time. And so I think that California has a very complex issue on its hands dealing with this because they make, I believe, all of the almonds for the United States.
Yeah.
So that drought is coming in at a hefty price. I wouldn't be surprised of seeing price hikes. I wouldn't be surprised of seeing different things, different alternatives, people pushing for different alternatives. But as well, when you shift one alternative, it's to be careful, because if I say, hey, I know this issue going on with almonds, now I want oat milk or pistachio milk. When are we going to shift and make another problem? So I think sustainability is more than just finding a better way. It's about finding a way that kind of supports itself and not destroys everything around it. But that's easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, it's such a struggle because we do see this, like, we keep seeing these sort of moves like, oh, producing dairy milk's very intensive on the environment. And so it's like, okay, well, we'll do this. And then you're like, oh, but now it's like we haven't figured out the way to balance it. There's 7 billion people on the planet. This might be a good alternative for 300,000 people, but maybe it's not the best alternative for all of us. So we're still in this massive sort of transition phase of like, oh, we know that this is probably better, but then as it turns out, it's not good when all 7 billion of us have decided that this is better. So very complex sort of situation going on. And it's funny, California, it's like, they don't have a lot of water. It's interesting. They've sort of positioned themselves as this producer, of all these sort of products. You're like, but all of it takes a lot of intensity. So it'll be interesting to see if a new market maybe opens up, or what the future might hold. So.
Right. Or even putting it in a different category as well. But yes, for sure.
Yeah. So let's go on to our last article, because I think we can pop back to the thoughts and coffee posts in the last few minutes. And Peter Bull's here now, so he can keep us on the timeline. But so good news for everyone who's been following along. In my circle, we call it the Stucky Boy. That was our favorite meme out of this whole adventure, was the Ever Given being named Stucky Boy. But he's loose, or they are loose, finally. So they were stuck in the Suez, and we all lived through that. And then they were held in a further part of the Suez Canal because there were some fees and fines and issues that they had to resolve. And now it is finally on its way to Europe. So what do you think, Sabrina, for the people who've had their goods stuck there since, when was this, March?
I'm so excited.
Back in March.
I'm so excited that it's freed. But I definitely think that it's time, as if we weren't doing it before with the pandemic, having those different types of strategies. Now that they know that something like that can happen, I think that's a call to industry to say, what is our ways around this? You see things now in the grocery store, I still have things in my grocery store. It says item, you can only pick one, or this is not in stock right now. So I think it's what do we do with that new information going to the grocery store, maybe not having the ingredients? Is that something that's going to be a norm or not a norm? But I'm really excited that it is freed, but it's definitely a call for, more strategy needs to be had for things like this.
Yeah, we're certainly learning in the supply chain. I think a lot of us modeled ourselves off of Toyota without really going into the assessment and analysis of what our own products were, what our own customers look like, and what our own market was. And, we tend to look to automotive as this sort of benchmark, but you're like, that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. And the pandemic's really highlighted what, kind of doesn't work. And so I know I've talked about this a bit with Sarah too. Like, it really, you want to, ideally it would just be easy. We'd all have one kind of supply chain and it'd be easy. But I think we all do have to each industry or each company has to sort of do their own kind of plan and look at different examples and figure out, maybe inputs from, a local area are, maybe a stronger resource. Maybe it's fine getting it from, farther away, but, we're ordering more in advance and we're going to include those storage costs. So, there's a lot of ideas here. Davin's got a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Davin's got a question. Did they say what the final compensation number ended up being? So I think we all know that they were looking for 900 initially. The ask was they were looking for $900 million worth of compensation. I think there was only maybe $500 million in value on the boat and goods. But yeah, I see Peter's got 700 million. Imtiaz has got 200 million. I read it might be not finalized what they've actually paid, or they're trying not to talk about it. Yeah, it's just big numbers for sure, because the boat is a massive one.
It is. I think that's another issue, is cybersecurity as a whole. In the oil, we've seen it in the oil industry as well as the information. So as we're talking about moving closer to digitization and automation, I think in the same sentence needs to be cybersecurity, because you can create these really complex systems to handle all these robotics. But if the security is not in the next breath, then I think that you're going to see a lot more of ransomware, a lot more, as a norm. It's going to become a norm if that's not in the sentence of things.
Yeah. I mean, we keep seeing it crop up, and there's discussions too around things like when we have these issues with the Evergreen or certain ships, there is the question that we still have a lot of seafarers. So the kind of crew that are manning, or sort of running these vessels, who've been stuck there throughout most of the pandemic. And so, I often question, like, is this just people being overtired or just wanting to be off this boat because they've been, essentially stuck there and forced to be there. So, this is another one where you're kind of like, was it this environmental condition? Was it this seafarer thing? Is it cyber terror? Is it like what's, it's never going to be a singular issue as we move into like, the 2020s, and beyond. So any last thoughts on the Evergreen?
No, I'm reading Peter's comment and I was wow.
Yeah.
I was just reading Peter's comment. That's all. And I didn't have any further comments, but it was really informative.
Yeah. So most people will know that we usually drop the article, so we'll be sharing this article afterwards. So this one was with CNN. Okay, so we have about 3 minutes. So maybe AJ can help me pull up the Thoughts and Coffee post that Sarah did. I think this is great for the last thoughts from me and Sabrina on our episode today. But so Sarah had talked about collaboration and what makes a great team, right? And so she sort of described like collaboration isn't always easy, and like any relationship, once you get in, there can be emotions and perceptions and perspectives that may come up that sort of threaten or sort of erode everything that you've been working towards. And so she's got a few things to consider here. So, focusing on communication, right? When you have a perception, it might just be sort of, what's coming up for you, but that might not be what's actually happening in the context of the relationship. So maybe a communication needs to be had to understand what's going on. Her next point, to be mindful, to have trust. And she talks about watching out for jealousy and envy. And I've sort of described that as ego. So what do you think for collaboration and long-term relationships is important?
I think the biggest takeaway from collaboration in any type of working environment is to get to know your team. And that doesn't, mean spending your Friday night with your coworker or your boss, but just in terms of every conversation is instruction. Yeah. And people are going to teach you how to treat them. And some people can overlook those things out of ego, mistrust, or a lack of communication. And it's to go in with a mindset that everybody's different, but we have a common goal. And so being open to what those differences are, a lot of the times will offset the, push-pull, who's in charge, who's doing what. So I would just say, get to know your team and listen to them, listen to, everything that goes into the project as a whole, and not just, okay, we get it done. What do we do? What do we do? Yeah. That's my biggest thing. That's helped me.
Yeah, that's great insight. I think the only thing I would think to add from my side would be, watch out for assumptions. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
we assume that people have more information than they do, or that they understand more than they do. And sometimes just taking the extra little bit of time to kind of clarify,
Right.
and use kind of straight language too. Like I'm pretty, I'm pretty, in my emails and stuff, I'm pretty straightforward. I don't kind of beat around the bush. It's like, this is what I'm looking for. And like, not to be unfriendly, but like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what we're trying to do. And yeah, so
That's
awesome.
perfect.
Yeah. Well, I think that is it for today. I know Peter gave me the 3-minute warning probably 5 minutes ago. So thank you for joining me. It was so nice to chat with you and get to know you a bit better.
All righty. Thank you guys so much for having me, Audrey.